Hello, I'm Sarah Morin, the Youth Experience Manager at Conner Prairie. This is the second video about working with youth volunteers. It's intended for the frontline staff in interpretation, ag, and education who will be working with youth volunteers, supervising them on post. So the last one was mostly about safety and applied to everyone. This one is more of the logistics of working side by side with them on post. So first off, who even are these kids and why do we have them? Well, we have three tracks of youth volunteers. The ones you'll be working with the most are the kids in our general volunteer program. And their ages 10 to 18. They put in over 120 hours for the year as individuals. And they are focused mostly on historic grounds and guest delivery. They go through an extensive selection process, and just 25 to 40% of them do make it into the program. Now, youth volunteers hold a unique place at Conner Prairie. They're coworkers in some way. They're here, doing chores, helping the guest, assisting us. But they're also guests in other ways, and we are also serving them. So our expectations can be high, but not unreasonable. Yes, they should be helping with chores, absolutely. But please remember they are kids donating their time. And so, like all volunteer experiences, even I imagine if you volunteer, if you think about things that you value about your own volunteer experience, it should be that combination of work, of contribution, but also some sort of enjoyment. So youth grow in leadership skills as part of this program, but they also benefit Conner Prairie and our guests. So last year they put in over 15,000 hours. Programs like Headless Horseman cannot run without them. And sometimes young guests just relate better to someone who's closer to their own age. So where is the Youth Volunteer headquarters? It is no longer the HR hub as it has been during construction. It is now in the Volunteer Center inside the MEC. If you're familiar with the old building, it's Old Discovery Station. It's near the doors that lead outside to the balloon. Youth will check in and out here. They'll get supplies here like mugs and fleeces, and they'll get some but not all of their activities for the day here. Briefing. Briefing will be held for both youth and for you as adults in the Volunteer Center hallway. So right outside the Volunteer Center. You'll meet your youth there at briefing. Please keep your youth with you after briefing as you go to post. And we'll let you know if a youth is running late and bring them to you or keep you updated over radio if they needed to cancel. For afternoon only youth, there is a youth briefing inside the volunteer center that you will not be attending, and then they will either walk out to you on their own if they're experienced enough, or we will bring them to you. And that will happen usually about 1:15 to 1:30 for that afternoon shift. Youth have options when it comes to when they volunteer. They can do morning only, afternoon only, or all day. So morning runs from briefing to 1, afternoon runs 1:15 to 5. And if they're staying all day, they don't need to come up for that little 15 minutes in the middle of the day. A big difference about 2026 and prior years during construction, youth staff are not collecting youth at the end of the shift from post. So before you might have seen us coming out at say, 12:15 to get the morning youth. That won't be happening anymore. For the morning shift, because we are much closer for our headquarters, morning only youth may walk or tram themselves up to the MEC. And you can assist them in remembering what time it is. It is ultimately their responsibility to get themselves up. If they don't show up on time, the youth pick may radio out to your post. If they're afternoon only or they're all day youth, then they will walk in with you. So you just get them to the MEC and then you've done your duty. They can return their costume room alone. They can walk to the volunteer center independently. Just get them to the MEC and then we'll take it from there. So we covered safety extensively last video, just some quick reminders about post. Be sure to know where your youth is at all times. They should be within eyeshot or earshot of an adult staff member or an adult volunteer at all times. So new this year, youth will be doing some guest engagement kits, some geeks. in the old candle shed outside of Animal Encounters, maybe at the Prairie Town Crossroads or Grove, maybe in the Junction Field. So sometimes youth staff will be with them, maybe an adult volunteer will be with them. Sometimes they may not, but in that case, we will let you know if you need to be their emergency adult. For example, we already have made arrangements with ag leadership that animal encounter staff for that shed right outside your barn. If there's a youth volunteer there, you are their emergency adult. And if you can just make sure periodically that you stick your head out, hey kid, are you okay? Do you need anything? Just so that they have that extra layer of safety. In the first loop of Conner Prairie, meaning the Mac, Lenape, Conner Cluster, Prairie Town, as long as they tell you and they have your permission to come up to the Mac, they may do so alone. You do not have to go with them. In that second loop, they should not be leaving that loop unless they're on the tram or with an adult, unless they're 16. Please let us know if you anticipate being one-on-one with a youth because maybe you're low staffed, maybe because visitation is very low. We as youth staff will also try to be very on top of that. Storms. If it is safe for your staff to be on post, it is safe for those youth unless it would leave them in a one-on-one situation. So if there is a call for an evacuation from the grounds because of lightning, unless you are also evacuated, youth can stay with you. If we anticipate that you'd be one-on-one with them, you can get together at the post nearby so you have a group of 3 or radio for us so we can get them. In extreme heat or extreme cold, we need to be very careful with the youth health. Sometimes in extreme heat, we will be pulling the youth off the grounds so they can cool down in the volunteer center, maybe doing activities or just having nice freezy pops. Extreme cold, we don't have youth out here volunteering if the wind chill is under 20, exception being if they have a heat source. If your youth is injured on post, please let youth pick no. Just like you, we need to A, make sure they're okay, or B, even if it's really minor, we love to document for liability reasons and to make sure that that is covered by insurance should anything arise later. In the event of an active assailant, keep your youth with you unless you can no longer go on together. If your youth is on break or you somehow got separated, don't take the time to find them. Save yourself. This will avoid injuries later. There is no obligation for you to risk your life for a youth, but once you reach safety, you are obligated to let the EMT, police, those authorities know about where did you leave them behind and if they're injured so that they can get help as soon as possible. More about active assailant will be in other trainings provided by Conner Prairie. A little about breaks. So youth volunteers will break most of the time in the volunteer center in the MEC, and youth staff will be there to supervise. Lunch will occur between 11:45 and 12:45. So if they're an all-day kid, then they can have 30 minutes for lunch sometime in that 1 hour window. If they're a morning only kid, they get 15 minutes for a morning break, and that should happen right at 11:45. Then they return to post. Afternoon kids and all-day kids will get an afternoon break of 15 minutes. That should happen sometime in the window between 3 and 3:30. Please let us know if your youth is very late getting back from break. We will help you find them. If a youth doesn't want to come up to the volunteer center or misses their break window, then we do have some other options. The cafe on the Commons, we are currently avoiding using the cafe upstairs in the MEC just because we're getting used to traffic flow in the building. That could change later. Youth may use the picnic tables by the playground in Featherston, the picnic tables by Treetop, picnic tables by River Crossing. For Prairie Town necessary and for Conner Annex, we are at this time changing it. So we really prefer they only use these for the restroom to help avoid those one-on-one situations. It is, however, okay for them to pop in there if they're just, refilling some water. They've been told by their adult, hey, go fill up this pitcher. That's fine. Or for sometimes those big festivals where we know we have a large group together. A little bit about trainings. Sometimes it will be noted that your youth is going to a training. We will then coordinate with you to make sure we pull them from post, maybe to go to a spinning training at the textile studio. The first 3 days of any new post, the youth are considered trainees, and this will be noted on the schedule so you know. Their first day as a trainee, they're in plain clothes, they're largely observing, but if they're feeling confident, you can give them little activities to do to engage with those guests. Costume or blue shirt, those would be day 2 and 3. So they've had their observation day and now they're ready to start hopping in with you, keeping them close by so they can observe, or with another adult or with another youth volunteer. So please take youth under your wing and explain what you're doing and let them observe. I'm pulling up now a training sheet for you to see. These are ones that we will send with them for the first 3 days that they are a trainee on any new post. Please note that we're collaborative and the word adult. Please help them with this sheet. Some of these they can fill out on their own. For example, it will say distinctly, is a youth supposed to be answering this question? Is the adult? So if it says youth, chances are they might be able to answer what new things they learned that day. Maybe they're struggling, however, with saying what an open-ended question they can use is. So you help them there. And then at the very end, there are questions just for you as adults. It helps us as youth staff know and support their growth if we know how ready do you think they are and how you think that they're doing in general. You can also speak to us face to face, but this is just a good record for that. Please take the youth under your wing as they're training and explain what you're doing as you do it. Or if it's a really busy day, we get it. Just make sure that they can kind of see because they're going to learn a lot of this just from watching you and observing. Now for a little bit about the role of youth staff, youth pick, assistant youth pick, and intern. Any of these people may be ones that are visiting you on post, and our job at that point are to support the youth and you in working with youth. We understand that you have a lot of different balls to juggle when you are out on post. And so, maybe if that kid is shy, is kind of struggling, we will either pick up on that by our own observation, or you can kind of give us a little nod to pull to the side and tell us, hey, the kid seems really shy. Can you look into it? And then we'll do some coaching right there on post while you focus on other parts of your job. So just signal to us if there are any problems that we need to be aware of or any extra coaching we need to do. You can also radio the youth pick for assistance, or if you suspect potential one-on-one situations will happen later that day. Who decides what the youth do for the day? Ideally, we want what the youth does each day to be a discussion between the youth and their post-adult. Sometimes we will pre-assign things, but it's also part of that balance between you being able to utilize them for what you need, but also their own leadership development to make that a discussion in the morning. So unless we have something very specific pre-planned, like maybe this is an activity that's happening at 11 o'clock, we need you all together in the Prairie Town Grove, that will be a discussion after briefing or when they arrive on post. We understand that although we encourage the kids to come up with ideas, maybe their grand idea is not possible that day due to heavy traffic, we don't have the supplies, or it's just a grandiose idea that is not going to happen. We understand that. And so if the youth doesn't have an idea that will work for you, or they just don't have the experience yet to know what's available to them, then please help direct them towards some opportunity. And the longer that they've been on a given post, the more they should be able to self-initiate. You may see youth working on a proficiency standard or wanting to learn a specific skill. You are never obligated to teach them that skill if you have not mastered it yourself, or other duties, crowd flow, just prevent you from doing it that particular day. So just explain that to the youth. They've been told to expect this, and then discuss something else that they can do. Now on to some coaching tips. So we've discovered over the years there are some good ways to build rapport and get the best results out of your youth for the day. First off, make sure the youth knows your name and that you know their preferred name, and not just their character name, although that's important, but also the real name. This is going to help establish that rapport there. And also, then if you're talking about that kid later to us, then we'll know who you're talking about. If the kid's coming out in the afternoon, then try to slip this in a moment between guests. So you can feel free to chit chat with your youth about those casual getting to know you things. It doesn't have to be a probing question, just like, hey, how's school going? You have any activities you're doing this summer? Just to kind of get to know a little bit about them and their interests. And that will just provide a good working synergy between you. A lot of the techniques that you use for engaging kid guests will work on the youth. Youth are going to pick up on your attitude. So if you have that playful, creative spirit, it'll definitely help set the tone for them. And the same and opposite goes for complaining about the weather. If they sense that you just don't want it that day, they're going to feel that and sometimes imitate that. They are always watching. If youth need encouragement to interact, I'd say that's our most common issue with youth is that some of them are a little too shy, especially in their first year. Then let them shadow you for a while. Some youth really thrive on this kind of mentorship and example, and then you can cue them periodically. You've been talking to that guest for a while, and the guest is looking at an object and like, this youth and I were just talking about that. Susie, can you explain what that is? Give them that little cue. If the youth appears tired or bored, you can give them a motor task, such as, let's go hunt for insects. Here's a jar. Why don't you find a guest and go hunting? Maybe playing a game with guests. Maybe running a message from one end of Prairie Town to another. And this gives them a brain and body break. When you think about it, if they're here all day, it is longer than a school day. And that's a lot to ask of a young person. That is also why we do encourage half days for many of them getting started out. Also, many youth love climbing things and will gladly climb into the high, tight spaces of river crossing or potentially in the future wellspring if you need them to look for lost things or clean. When you give youth a task or chore to do, make your explanation clear. Check on their progress with the task, such as, Joe, how's building things with the rigamajig going? Did any guests join you? How did that go? And that helps them process and debrief and also gives them that little signal like, yeah, are you engaging those guests? Having good, clear instructions is good for everybody, but keep in mind that we also have some neurodivergent volunteers. And sometimes, if you have a kid with ADHD, that really helps to break things down into steps for them and be very clear. Another option for getting good results is to teach them a new skill set. They are here to learn. That's one of the reasons they self-selected into this program. So, I'm learning how to identify trees with this book. Let's figure this out together, and then we'll know how to do it for when the guests come. It's also okay to switch activities with them. They don't have to do the same thing all shift. Sometimes they just need a little bit of a rotation. It can even be the same two or three things the whole shift and just, okay, half hour on this, half hour on that, half hour on this, half hour on that. Now, if youth become a staph infection, by which I mean they're all clustering together without really a purpose, you can then ask them, all right, I see you're all together. What's an activity you can do with the guests all together, such as maybe playing rounders, a big group game, or remind them, it's great that you want to be with your friends. Really, that's something that you should be doing on break. We're here to serve the guests, so why don't we scatter so we don't intimidate them with our big group? If it's a slow time, you've already gotten the chores you need done, you can use that time to practice communication engagement skills with the youth. So a common thing that I'll do as I'm visiting them is I'll just role play. I'm like, I'm going to be the guest. What would you do when I come in? And then just have them then say, okay, what did they do well in that interaction? What would they like to change? And you could then maybe have them analyze something that they'd seen you do on post. It is very common when we have youth do exit interviews from the program that they say, I wish I hadn't been so afraid to ask questions my first year. So a lot of them, they're like sponges. They want to absorb that information, but they may not be sure how to bridge that gap. They may be a little intimidated of us still. And so sometimes being that first to offer, just like you would with a guest, can make a big difference. Also, be aware some of our youth really get bothered when young guests misbehave, such as, let's say, in treetop, running and shouting. So, just helping to reframe this in their minds can be a big help. These guests are moving. They're moving their bodies, they're exploring nature, they're exploring. It does get a little loud. That's okay. And then if it's bothering them because maybe it's a sensory issue, it is okay for that youth to take an extra break and then come back. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about your impact as adult staff who are working alongside these kids. You probably joined Conner Prairie because you're passionate about history, education, ag, and you want to share that passion. And youth volunteers are a prime audience, and they're ready to catch on to your excitement. If you joined because you want to make a difference in the lives of others, please know, youth, they are watching you closely and learning from you. They can pick up if you're annoyed at them, they can pick up if you're invested in them. And almost without exception, when I do youth exit interviews, the youth mention that the adults I worked with are one of my favorite parts of this program. One moment as I share a visual for you. Here you see impact quotes. These are from surveys and exit interviews from youth and guardians. And if you look at these, you can see that youth are very appreciative that they grew in communication skills. They maybe picked up here something that then became their life's work later in life. They lose social anxiety. There's so many ways in which you are having a hand in helping these kids not only have a great supported life now, but become successful adults for the future. And so I want to read the bottom corner and the right, one of my favorite quotes. This was the year I finally felt like I found my place. I had been wanting to work here for so long since I could first remember stuff, but I have been struggling in school, moving through groups of people, not finding my place. When I first arrived at training, I felt worried, thinking I would be judged, but everyone here welcomed me with open arms. I made new friends, and the best part was the support and kindness from everyone. So never underestimate the impact that you can have. And I thank you for all of the efforts you're going to make with our youth volunteers this year. Do not hesitate to reach out to youth staff if you have any questions, concerns, ideas. Bye.